It is my pleasure to welcome Sanjoy Roy, Managing Director of Teamwork Arts, which produces over 33 festivals in 42 cities and 17 countries, including the well-known Jaipur Literature Festival and international editions of JLF. Welcome, Sanjoy. He is going to be the moderator for this session. He will be joined by Amish Tripathi, who needs no introduction. He is a well-known author, former diplomat, and TV documentary host. He will be also joined by Nandita Das, who has acted in more than 40 feature films in 10 different languages. Rajshri Deshpande also joins them on the panel. She is an activist and actress. Welcome to all of you. They will also be joined by Zainab Patel, who currently works with Cummins India as DNI lead. She previously was also the DNI lead at KPMG. She's running a few minutes late, but she is expected to join the panel. Over to you, Sanjoy. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much and welcome everybody to the second day of Chacha by the Nudge Institute and my colleagues at Teamwork. Absolutely delighted to be here, and it's been so buzzy yesterday and today, walking around outside, meeting so many people, and I do hope you guys are all, or everybody's been having a very positive interaction and a good time. We have a wonderful group of panelists, and one of the things we're going to talk about is how do stories influence us? And I'm going to start with a short story of what happened one year at the Jaipur Literature Festival. It was the fourth year, and we'd started growing very quickly, very fast, and a lot of people were coming. In the fourth year, we'd invited Oprah Winfrey, or rather Oprah Winfrey had sent us an email saying, would we consider inviting her? And we, of course, said, yeah, let me give it a thought. Of course, we invited her. And it was also the year that Salman Rushdie was supposed to come. So we had put in place security. And because we had put into place security, you know, I received people for an hour every day, as many of you know. That particular morning, I was there at 7:30. The gates of Diggy Palace opened. And a man and a boy came through the doors. And because they looked like they didn't belong, they were stopped by the security. And because I was there, I went up and I said, Bhaiya, kya baat hai? Can I help you? And the man said, you know, I sleep on the pavement opposite SMS Hospital up the street. And I know that I'll never be able to send my son to school because I can't afford it. Nor will I, hi Zainab, thank you for coming. And nor will I ever be able to afford to buy a book for my son. But I thought if he heard a story, it will change his life forever. And I hear you tell stories. And therefore I brought him, and you know, and he turned around and he apologized. And he was about to leave, and I said, no, this is what we're doing this festival for. It is for people who don't have access. And that's the power of storytelling for somebody who didn't have access to stories. But each of you have access. So Nandita, I'm going to start with you. 40 films, and for those of you who don't know, Nandita acted in her first film that we once produced, which was really about bringing about social change. It was on diarrhea of all things, which we shot somewhere in Haryana to show how ORS solution should be used. And obviously we were doing it in a storytelling way rather than just a documentary. Nandita went on to act in over 40 films. Some of them created huge controversies, but she also went on to direct her own set of films, first being Firak. And one of the things that you showed us, Nandita and Firak, is that you talked about the violence that had happened or what had ensued at the back of what we all know, but you didn't use violence to be able to delineate that. And a little while ago, you and I were talking about some of the comments that have been coming in post the horrific incident in Calcutta, where people are saying they should be burnt, etc. And I think both of you and me have been saying Justice has to be done, but it has to be done, and it cannot be about mob justice. So tell me a little bit about your process, Manto Zigato?
Zwigato.
Zwigato.
Tongue twister.
Anybody here seen Zwigato?
Well,
you are people who've seen.
A few
yes.
hands.
How many of you have seen Firak? Firak is online. It's a must-see for everybody. And how many of you have seen Manto? Wow. So Manto seems to have... Yeah,
No,
you should be able to.
She was in Manto.
So Nandita, tell us your process. And
Yeah, no, Firak was also pre-digital, pre-OTT era, so yes, it's on YouTube. So yeah, the process of, firstly, there are too many questions you've asked, so I'm just trying to figure out which one, but talking of Firak and why I chose not to show violence, I think through that maybe something more can be expanded on. Today violence has been so normalized, so glamorized, that it's almost that you have to make it so extreme for us to feel anything, which is really tragic. I mean, today, violence is not something that we even talk about. Every second mainstream film has it in the name of thriller, action, drama. So it's just, blood spurting out, cars overturning, people killing, like anyway in a country like ours where there's no value of life. If you're on Instagram, you will see somebody has died of this, it's just another statistics. So it was a very conscious, I as a viewer don't like to see violence in films. Maybe the skin hasn't become so thick, so that even as a viewer, so as a filmmaker, that's a choice I made, that I wanted to set Firak in a post-riot scenario. So because when the violence finishes, there is a lot that lingers on. And it's about that. It's about the hopelessness. It's about, not knowing what to do next. It's about the anger. It's about desire for revenge. It's about loneliness. There's a lot that just lingers on. To me, that was more important and something I wanted to explore. Also, even then and now more so, we are very polarized. When you take an extreme stand in a film, you polarize further. Those who agree with me will be like, yeah, right, she did the right thing. And those who disagree will say no. But how do we create a sense of empathy? How do we make the person, the character, even if it is the other, even if it is someone that you are prejudiced against or you've discriminated in your life, but still show a human face? That's what cinema allows you. It's not about a community, it's not about a statistics, it's about that person. Can I care for this person? And I think fear does it really well. So I've always liked to explore this emotion of fear, that what happens when people feel fearful? And that creates an empathy. If I can relate to that fear, if I can feel for that character's fear, I would have in some way inculcated some sense of empathy. And I think, films don't create any revolutions. Greater films have come and gone, and we're still seeing much worse times. But the reason why we still keep doing what we do, because we somewhere believe that subconsciously stories go subliminally into our minds, into our hearts, and they change things very gradually. And we see that change through how we respond the next time to some of those same issues. So that was the effort.
Nandita, you're seen as an activist filmmaker, actor, activist. And it's
people are always wondering how should they be writing
how
the
it
description.
Should be labeled. Is there, within those labels, is there a responsibility? Today, हम यहाँ पे है चर्चा कर रहे हैं. We're part of the Charcha, which is part of the Nudge Institute. Do you feel that there's a responsibility of the creative person or the filmmaker or the actor to nudge people in a way that perhaps can bring about positive change?
The fact our area of influence is a little wider than somebody who may not be engaged in the public domain. And of course, there are degrees of it, right? A lot of the times people tell me, why don't you do more commercial films? Then what you really want to talk about, the things you care for, will reach more people. But then I feel, will I be the same person if I did things that don't come from a deeper conviction or do something that... So it's not about how big your circle of influence is, but whatever your circle of influence is, that creates... People do watch you, people do think about you, and you can't fool them for too long, right? So you have to, I think, just be true to yourself
and your convictions, and that conviction then instills a courage to stand up for those convictions. Whether it's in a talk, whether it's what you write, whether it's what you act in or what you direct, it reflects. And everybody here also will take different things. You know, we are going to talk, but each person will take from it what works for them, what they connect with. So there's no way to really measure it, but definitely I feel there is a responsibility. Yet, I feel I can't tell you to be responsible or you to be. Like people say, oh, this fairness creams, because I've been against this whole obsession with fairness and this prejudice against dark skin. And sometimes people say, why don't you tell all these big A-list actors who are promoting, these fairness creams? And I'm like, that's up to them. I can't go and tell you what you should be doing, because I'm also fiercely for freedom of expression. If I want my freedom, you have your freedom. So I think that responsibility has to come from within, to see, to know that this is my area of influence. How I think, what I do, what films I choose, my choices, all that is being seen, and it's up to them what they take from it.
Amish, Nandita talked about violence. As we know, a lot of people today blame gaming, which primarily looks at violence as a staple diet. But if you go back all the way to the Mahabharata, for example, there was violence, but the violence then lent to a story, lent to a possible understanding of what is the philosophy behind it. Do you have a sort of take on how violence needs to be addressed in today's world?
Good question. I think our ancestors realized that violence does happen, even in nature, right? And the point of the Mahabharata wasn't a celebration of violence. It was to show the risks of violence, but also in cases where, say, violence may be justified. There's, of course, the very famous line which everyone would have heard of, ahimsa parmo dharma. But there's a line that comes after that, dharma hinsa tathaivcha, that violence in the cause of dharma, and dharma is often erroneously translated as religion. It's actually above religion, it's beyond religion. It's that which creates balance, that which sustains. And at times like that, then maybe violence is justified. That's the point of the Mahabharata. How do you make sure that your warriors, and every society will have its warriors, how do you make sure that they have a code which serves the larger good? Because where a society gets destroyed is when the warriors realize, actually we can take whatever we want and no one can do anything about it. The self-restraint that can come to warriors will actually be the greatest hold. And then I think the point of a story often is to communicate deeper philosophies. If a story is just something that exists at a surface level, then it's a hero and heroine, kind of running around a tree. That can be fun too. I enjoy a Salman Khan movie or a Rajnikant movie as much as the next person. But there is another set of stories which have a deeper purpose. The tradition goes that Ved Vyas ji compiled the Vedas. That's how he got the title Ved Vyas. His name was actually Krishna Dwaipayan. Ved Vyas is actually a title. Every age has its own Ved Vyas. Whoever compiles the Vedas in that age gets the title Ved Vyas. So he got that title because he compiled the Vedas. But the tradition goes that he realized that even for those who are really siddhas, who are really adept, understanding the philosophies of the Vedas can be difficult. They are very esoteric. That's why the Mahabharata is called the fifth Veda, because it's believed that he wrote it as a story, so that through that story, which you are enjoying, you can learn the philosophies of the Vedas without it being too overpowering. That's a power of a story. What a storyteller gets is the most precious thing that people can give, which is not their money actually, it's their time and attention. That is the most precious thing that anyone can give you. Because if your purpose is to make money, there are much easier routes. I mean, you can be a banker.
Or you can be a robber.
You can...
A bank robber, not just a bank. Oh, but actually maybe sometimes it's the same thing. But.
Yeah, but that's the power of a storyteller. That you can get their time and attention, through which then you can communicate your philosophies.
You know, one of the first people in many ways who nudged many of us to go back to the epics, apart from B.R. Chopra and Mahabharata and Ramayana, was you, Amish, when you wrote your first Shiva trilogy, the very first one. You went around, you went to what, 26 odd publishers, and
Everyone rejected it.
Everybody
They said it's a
rejected
guaranteed flop.
Guaranteed flop. Today, of course, he makes millions of dollars just in his advances for any new trilogy that he launches. But when you decided that you would self-publish it, which is what your first book was, did you have a sense within you that this is something, the time has come for this? Or this story in the way that you have reinterpreted it, because you have reinterpreted an age-old story, its time had come?
No, frankly, I had no idea at that time. I wrote my first 2 books along with my job. I was a banker. I don't come from a wealthy family. माँ बाप का आशीर्वाद है, जायदाद कुछ नहीं है.
You come from a knowledgeable family, which is wealthy.
More goddess Saraswati than goddess Lakshmi stayed away from our family. So for me, I had to keep my job going to pay the bills. It was a banking job, paid well. And the books were more about self-expression. And it's a story and a set of philosophies that I actually wanted to say. I didn't know whether people would be willing to read it or not, and that's not up to me, that's up to them. There was, among the publishers who rejected, there was this one publisher who said, your storytelling style is very good, it's a fast-paced story, it's 500 pages, but one can get through it quickly. I was actually told this, but you have these Gyan sessions every second, third chapter, where you're talking about philosophies and you're quoting the Vedas, and he said, this will turn people off, and please remove this. And that for me was actually removing the soul of the book. So I refused, and then of course it was rejected. I self-published, and that's where I think often producers, publishers misread the audience, because those parts are actually among the stuff that, the philosophical parts, are actually the stuff that gets discussed the most. And look, I actually genuinely believe one of the misfortunes of India on both sides, on the left and the right, many of the left liberals don't realize that our ancient culture is actually their biggest ally. If they actually read those texts, quoting American examples to propagate liberalism to India is not going to work, right? When you quote from our own texts, it will work, right? You don't have to make stuff up. It's actually all there in our ancient texts. And even on the right-wing side, so many of them who are proud of it actually don't read those texts.
They don't read.
And no, many of them do. No, many of them do. I'm talking about the ancient texts. Sanjay. And yes, for all of us who have had the privilege of reading that and can convert, we'll actually do good for our country.
You know, Amish, the gathering, Charcha, Nudge Institute, many people here, most people here are from the not-for-profit and the NGO sector. When you went out with this book, you put on your marketing hat in many ways, and you were
only when the book was finished.
When the book was finished, you put on your marketing hat and you said, I'm going to make sure that this book finds the maximum kind of space. What would be of great interest for us is, because our messages are not necessarily sexy, but our messages are vital. How do we take something that's vital and put it out in a way that makes it sexy and brings about change? Would you have
The way I see it, I've said this a few times actually, for the want of a better term, a good artist should be almost schizophrenic. When you're creating your work, when you're writing your book, when you're making your movie, care a damn about anyone else. Do what feels right to your soul. Truly follow what Lord Krishna said. Karmanyavadikaraste ma phaleshu kadachana. Just enjoy that karma. Right? Then it will come out the way it's meant to. That doesn't mean it will be successful. Maybe that work doesn't have a purpose at this time, but it will come out the way it was meant to, because you're being true to your soul. I still write my books that way. But once the work is complete, once your book, movie, painting, anything is complete, then you have to become a pragmatic marketing guy. Put your, give the right brain a rest, push your left brain into action. You cannot, don't sell the soul of your product, because then, like I said, if that's the purpose, then become a banker actually, and you can make money on that. Because then your main purpose is actually not to communicate your story. Your main purpose is to make money. But everything needs good marketing. Nothing sells by itself. On my book, for example, my first
Any
book,
advice on how to get?
every product has its own challenge, and you have to know the age you're living in as well. When I published my first book, 2010, we didn't have the problem of a smartphone. People weren't that distracted. The ideas I came up with at that point of time, for example, distributing the first chapter free of cost at retail stores, at the cash counter. If you think about it, and with the same cover as the main book, and we did this a week before the launch of the book. If you think about it, 2010, most people didn't have smartphones. They'd walk up to the cash. If someone is at the cash counter, he's a serious customer. He's not browsing, he's actually come to buy. Billing is happening at that time. There's a magic 30 seconds where the guy has nothing to do and he has no smartphone to distract him. If at that point he sees a booklet with a very nice cover, says free on top, he'll just pick it up, go home, read the first chapter. What happened actually when we distributed that? The first chapter did so well, many of the chain stores actually raised their order before the launch of the book, within a week. Which is why the book hit the bestseller charts in the first week itself.
So maybe
but
one
this
of the,
idea won't work now.
maybe one of the things he's suggesting is that in between the chai being ordered and the chai being handed over, you use that time to get out the message that you want in some of these places.
There's a
perhaps.
different scenario now. Now the biggest problem is an author is not just competing with other authors. He's competing with an Instagram feed. He's competing with a movie that people are, now the problem isn't that people aren't getting messages. Now the problem is they are overloaded with messages. So how do you market in this time? It's a different challenge. And the point is, when you want to market, then become a pragmatic, practical guy, figure out how you're going to market this without touching that product. Because if you're going to do that, then might as well just sell out and become a corporate guy, do an MBA.
Nandita, you wanted to.
Sorry. In the spirit of Charcha, Amish, two things that I just want to respond to. One is that how does one say that sometimes violence is justified? And that's something I also grapple with. I mean, for me, getting angry this morning, I got really upset about something, trivial at home. Now, obviously, I'm not thinking about it. But every time I get angry, I feel this is an act of violence. I'm adding to the violence in the world because everyone feels their violence is justified. And the minute we give this tool, then we have unleashed something that is going to be so subjective. So therefore, especially in times we are living in, I feel where there is so much violence, there's road rage, there's rape, there's domestic violence, at every sphere there is violence. And violence is so deeply connected to power. The one who can be violent, I can be angry with someone who I know will take my bullshit, right? You only get angry with people.
Where's your mother? Your mother was somewhere in there.
My mother, father, they are both here. But you don't get angry with someone that you know you can't get away with. So it is a lot to do with power. So just want to park this thought and, so there are two things. So there are two things. Yeah? So one is, just to react, one is that how can violence really ever be justified? And that's a challenge for authors, filmmakers, because we also want to show the dark side. It's not that we all want to show everything that's good, good that's happening. So how do we show violence? I'm getting all column. How do we show violence in a way that churns our stomach as opposed to being titillated by it or enjoy it? That's one thing. Two, what you said about going back to our scriptures. Left liberals, you weren't looking at me or Sanjoy, right? Okay. So, going back to our scriptures, and this is no offense, of course, every culture has something wonderful. I think we are getting, again, very polarized. Everything is bad in the West, everything is good in the East, or vice versa. Some people are becoming too Western, some people are becoming too parochial. Like Tagore, Bangali will agree, that, he just said, keep your doors and windows open. Anything good that's coming from anywhere, become more discerning so that you can take the best of all that's available. Just wanted to park these two.
Just one line. What Gurudev Tagore,
that side of the stage.
Gurudev Tagore said, a lovely Sanskrit line, Ano Badraha Kritro Yantu Vishwataha. Let noble thoughts come to me from all directions. It's an ancient Sanskrit line, comes from the Vedic times. This was actually the approach of the ancient Indians. Noble thoughts should come from everywhere.
Not just in Sanskrit,
Of course.
it can be in many other languages.
Of course, of course. There's a version of that. No, there's a version of that in Pali as well, by the way.
Okay, your one line is over. I'm going to come back to you about violence, and just to correct, I'm neither left liberal or right. I'm Khan Market gang because I've got long hair, so that's okay. Rajshri, activist actor, and this is a very clear terminology for you. But I want to first come to the acting part. Your most recent work, Trial by Fire, which was based on this horrific incident that happened at the Upahar cinema, where 50 odd people died.
59.
59 people died, primarily because health and safety was not looked at, and the
Fire and safety.
fire and safety. Well, health safety sort of covers all of it. More recently, because of the floods, some children or some young people died again in a flood-related incident not so far away from here. It's been a year or so since this film has come out, since the series has come out, Trial by Fire.
Yeah.
Have you seen any, or do you have an understanding of how this has impacted this particular space? And do you see any kind of change at all, or the possibility of change?
Hi, everyone. You know, I was just relieved when you said there are a lot of non-profit people are sitting here, who all are actually social workers here from the non-profit. You know, they all know that what actually happening on ground. I have been part of drought to floods to earthquakes to working in the traffic sheltered homes to the communities since like 12 years now. I come from a village. I have seen atrocity in my household since my childhood, with my own family and my surroundings going through tons of things. I decided to kind of, like my mother wanted us to just get educated and leave. And when I decided, Sanjoy, that, I think I'm just thinking about myself. When I was working, I was making money. And I thought that I don't know I'm not growing anywhere. I'm dying somewhere because I'm just blinded myself and I'm just moving ahead. And when one fine day I decided that I have to quit all that and move here and get into the literature, get into the art field, and get to know the society well. So from that day onwards till today, every day I think about that only, that whatever I'm doing, on screen and on my real life, on my, my social work, what is actually happening in between that? Be it my first film, Angry Indian Goddesses, which talks about women safety, women issues, tons of other things which all 7 goddesses are going through, to Sexy Durga, where a woman is, on a ride and she's, how she gets molested, where, tons of controversy happened because of the whole, the goddess name involved with sexy, and people thought that, I don't know what kind of a movie is this, and then the whole, I've got death threats, I've got tons of other issues, my parents been harassed for that, but nobody actually thought that what actually is there in the film, but people just wanted to criticize. Be it even with Trial by Fire, this 25-year of Neelam's struggle, which we have portrayed in a 7-episode series, and we spoke a lot, me and Neelam spoke a lot about this, that, look, Rajshri, nothing has changed. We may talk about it, the cinema, the documentaries, the panel discussions, the social media debates, there are tons of articulated conversations to, policies. We have written policies. But what is on ground? Nothing. When you go on ground, you actually see that, you know, the amount of policies and rights which we have written and we have discussed and we have debated on a social media spaces are nothing has reached to those people. So even if we talk about trial by fire, of course, you know, that I think there is a little hope I have. That's the reason I've continued being an actor, telling stories, you know, which Nandita rightly said, you know, something which has a soul, which has a purpose, which has an understanding, you know, that's the reason I've continued, because I know that this is maybe a tiny part of it. So I know that trial by fire, Durga, or you know, sacred games, to even goddesses, all these stories are tiniest part of my. It's a long work, and I think, you know, these people over here, these social workers who actually go on ground, they are the real heroes, who's actually understanding that what's happening. You know, because no matter how many research paper we have, no matter how many books we write, no matter how many films or documentaries we make, but if we don't work on ground, if the implementation and action is not done, then no matter how many trial by fire I do, the fire and safety regulation will be like this forever.
How many of you have seen Trial by Fire, the series? And how many of you have seen Sacred Games? Right. So, you know, I'm going to use the example of Salam Bombay. Anybody seen Salam Bombay, Meera Nair's film? So, you know, we set up the Salam Balak Trust post Salam Bombay, and I think we now looked after about 150,000 kids. So it's made a difference. But in this work that you've done, in your village, just going down to the microcosm, has there been change after Angry Goddess and Sexy Durga when you go back to your village?
Oh God, okay, I can tell you about after Sacred Games. Let me come back to that. So in 2018, Sacred Games came out, July, this time only actually. And I was in the village and I had just started my first school. So it's been 2015, I had revived a river in a village. And like immediately after the earthquake, I moved to a village, like I went back to my drought villages in close to Aurangabad, Marathwada, and I started researching and I started working there. That also happened because the earthquake I saw in Nepal, and I worked in a village there, and I felt that this is not a sustainable work we are doing. What we are doing is we are giving things. You know, we have not empowered anyone. We have not made leaders over there. We have not done you know, a proper work. What the NGO which I was volunteering to, we just came. चलो ये करना ये करना ये करना ये करना हो गया काम. Pictures मिल गए, photographs मिल गए, videos मिल गए, done. And they left. I had 15 children I was taking care of. Those were orphan kids. I could just see them that all these kids are going to get into trafficking. These girls are going to get into God knows where, you know. And I was so disheartened, and I felt that I don't know how am I going to do it. So when I went back to my drought villages and I started working, I thought that, you know, this is the space I understand because I come from there. I am a daughter of a farmer. My mother, you know, was there to guide me and take me forward because I was really depressed. And she said, let's just drive down to the villages. Let's talk to the farmers. Let's see what happens. Understand what is actually necessary. And that's the journey happened. And basically, what I wanted to say is, you know, both the things are interconnected. You know, see, I feel that my social work also started because of literature and cinema and books. So all these people have inspired me also to be a social worker.
आपके गांव में क्या फर्क पड़ा जब आप वापस गए?
वापस गए तो, you know, it's like, the first thing is, of course, my first village when I went, so like after traveling for 3-4 months, one of the villages, an old lady said, And I was like constantly, she thought that I'm a government person or an NGO person or something. And she said, ye de do, wo de do. And I was just telling her, you know, कि आपने बात क्यों नहीं की, आपने ग्राम पंचायत से क्यों नहीं बात की, ग्राम सेवक को क्यों नहीं इन्वॉल्व किया, फिर आपने केंद्र सरकार से क्यों नहीं बात की, आपका ये तो I was also pointing fingers to her and saying the whole team over there was gathered कि आपने ये क्यों नहीं किया. And then she said, तुम क्या करने वाली हो बताओ मुझे, किया होता इन लोगों ने तो मेरे घर में आज अनाज होता, मेरे घर में पानी होता, मेरे घर में पानी नहीं है, तू बता मुझे पानी कैसे ला के देगी. So it kind of shook me, and then I immediately started, because I'm not a technical person. For me, the willpower, and because it comes from my personal space, I started immediately working, and I had to get people on board, like environmentalists on board, to understand कि ये पानी का काम कैसे शुरू करना है. And I got educated myself how to actually revive a river, understanding all the rivers of Maharashtra to India, you know. And then I started working. I revived the river. But first thing I made them together. I said, आप लोग जब साथ नहीं होंगे तब तक हम काम नहीं कर पाएंगे. तो हर एक घर जाके एक एक को जमा करना, उनको समझाना कि आपको क्या ज़रूरत है और क्यों करना है हमें ये सब, और हमें ये करने के बाद हम क्या कर सकते हैं. सो इट वाज लाइक अ 5-year of plan I did. I revived the river, then I built 200 toilets, and then I started a healthcare in the same village, and I built a school also there. So in 2018, when I was building the school, just Sacred Game came out, and one of my clip was viral over there, which was an intimate scene between me and Nawaz, and it was everywhere. And I was like, मैंने बोला था मेरे घर वालों की ये तो फेक है, तो उनको तो लगा कि हाँ ये तो फेक है, मेरी बेटी ऐसा वैसा, तो whatever, you know. And in my village I was constantly saying that, you know, you don't think about what is happening there, you think तुम्हारे पास संडास नहीं है उसके ऊपर काम करो, तुम्हारे पास स्कूल नहीं है उसके ऊपर काम करो, तुम्हारे बच्चे स्कूल नहीं जा रहे हैं, वो तुम उनको शुगर कटिंग लेबरर्स पे लेके जा रहे हो. थिंक अबाउट देयर फर्स्ट थिंग, डोंट लुक एट योर फोन एंड लुक एट मी. I'm not here as a Rajshri Deshpande as an actor. I'm here because I care. I'm here because I'm part of this space. So no matter whatever on screen, एक तो 2018-19 तक लोगों को नहीं पता था कि मैं एक एक्टर हूँ करके. तब तक उनको लगता था कि कोई तो आती है हमारे यहाँ पे काम करके चली जाती है. So that's how it happened. And in, you know, like later on, like 2018 to 2020, it took me 2 years to build a school. It was a very hard battle for me because, you know, the money was not coming from a right channel. You know, people were not donating, but like, you know, Congress wale aa gaye, शिवसेना वाले बोल रहे मैं दे दूंगा, यू नो, ऑल द पार्टी स्टार्टेड सेइंग कि हम दे देंगे, आप ही हो ना वो सेक्रेट गेम्स वाले, हम आपको पैसे चाहिए स्कूल बनाए मैं हम दे देंगे. एंड आई वाज कॉन्स्टेंटली बीइंग अवे एंड पीपल वर नॉट पेइंग. तो मैं अपना ना आज मैंने ईंटें खरीदे, प्लीज़ पैसे दे दो. सो आई केप्ट ऑन सेइंग एवरीवन, आई वेंट टू एवरीवनस हाउस, आई वेंट टू नंदिताज हाउस ऑल्सो. आई एम लाइक, यू नो, ऐसा ऐसा काम कर रही हूँ मैं, प्लीज़ थोड़ा डोनेट कर दो. That's how she is also part of that school. That's how I took 2 years to build one school, and then people realized कि अच्छा ये हमारे लिए ही कुछ कर रही है. And then
I'm going to come back to, a big round of applause for. I'm going to come back about the power of personality in this space in a second. Hold on to that. Zainab, thank you. And she got off a flight which was late from Bombay. She's come straight from the airport. So thank you so much. In your case, you brought about huge change. You really, you have struggled, you have fought. The community that you've represented has always been, in many ways, sidelined or always been discriminated against. Very recently at JLF Houston, I remember we did a session called Banned, Burnt, and Censored, because Texas and Florida are the 2 states that have the maximum number of books banned. They had banned Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet, Margaret Atwood's Handmaid's Tale, and The Diary of Anne Frank. This was last year. This year they've banned a whole host of new books, including Cinderella, etc. At the end of the session, which I was chairing, 2 of the people came up to me from the audience and said, "Thank you for educating us in terms of the impact of what happens when a book is banned. We will go back to our district board and try and see if we can rescind that ban. We didn't have any idea that this was the impact. So Zainab, the question for you is, we need to also provide considered knowledge and information to be able to push back on hatred, ignorance. Ignorance invariably gives rise to hatred.
I'm actually going to start by talking about Nandita and how a film made an impact on my life. I was a fresher in college and I was still transitioning, yet exploring my sexuality. And when Fire came out many, many years ago, about 20 odd years ago. 28. Yes, that reminds me, I'm on the better side of life.
The controversy hasn't gone
Yes,
down. But
Imagine how old I am then.
So,
I'm 30. Yeah, I'm 30.
yes. And when Fire came out, and I was working with an NGO called the Humsafar Trust, I must say, due to my ignorance or due to my non-exposure to many members of the lesbian bisexual community, I did not really understand what it meant for a woman to love another woman. But when we saw the film and we decided to stand for it, I think there was one underlying thought that was the most prominent, was that here is freedom of expression. Here is freedom to safely confide into somebody else. To become intimate is to feel safe and to become intimate with someone is one of the most challenging things that we Indians kind of deal with, whether in relationships, in personal space, professional spaces. And at that point of time, the erstwhile Shiv Sena Undivided were having protests all over Mumbai, and we were this motley group of people who didn't know what we were protesting, but we said we would go out Shivaji Park near the Sena Bhavan and protest, and we got picked up by the police and we were escorted. We got chai nashta at the police station and we were kept in the police station for some time. No case was registered, but we went out. But coming to what Sanjoy just said, I come from the transgender community, more specifically the Hijra Kinnar community. And one of the most important part that we play is that of storytelling. It's an inherent trait because we talk about everything that's good, auspicious and positive. Listening to the conversation around me and listening about violence, I think my community has been to the worst sense of violence. One is that to live up to most of your sense of acceptance, we have to mutilate our bodies to come to a degree of acceptability by you all. Look at the dichotomy of the situation. When you're working with persons with disability, we count disability by percentage, 10%, 20%, 50%, 100% disability. And here you're expecting another person to conform to your sense of identity, politics, by mutilating their body to come to some standard that matches your own. And that is reflective in the state, and by the state I mean every policing authority, whether it is the lawmakers, the law enforcers, the executive.
And the judiciary.
Yes, and the judiciary, because they interpret things for us, but even common men. I was listening to this story about, I used to work with the UN when the Nirbhaya case happened many years ago. And today, when this Abhaya incident has happened in West Bengal, as human beings, we love violence. We absolutely revel in it. If you look at one of the most common searches on social media, it's violence and porn, almost similar in the kind of search fractions that we may see. And why is it that only when people are dismembered, eyes and limbs gouged out of their body, beheaded, burnt, that we get into this frenzy of emotions around it? So for me, dealing with violence is part of my day-to-day existence. Whether I choose to address it, I don't choose to address it or not, But you know, the misinformation tirade, and I'm going to try, Sanjay, to something that came up when the marriage equality case was being heard in the Supreme Court. People called us urban elitist and mafia, and someone said about me that we should get her funding check. By all means, do go and get my funding check, because the kind of income tax that I pay, in 10 years, I can have a Zainab Patel flyover somewhere in Bombay. But I was told that I was an urban naxal and an urban elitist, and for about 6 years I lived in a slum because people in high rises would not want me to be part of them. I moved now to Pune, and I got discriminated because of my name, Zainab Patel. I'm actually born in a Christian family. I love Krishna, but I have a Sufi name, Zainab. So what does that make me? So today I'm actually, when it comes to revealing my identity, I'm actually scared about going ahead and talking about it. I really do not know how to anticipate. But when you're talking about knowledge and awareness, sometimes the fact that all of us who work in the non-profit space have encountered violence, and we've almost kind of normalized it. It's, you know, even normalized our own emotions to it. Like in my own transgender community, there are thousands of abhayas happening every year, and we are not even counted. I'll give you an example. There was a very young trans person who was doing exceptionally gifted, doing her BE in civil engineering, very, very fabulous dancer and a great artist, you know, would paint very well. But her own way of expressing herself could only come into dance. She only saw dance as a medium to express herself, you know. And she joined, at that point of time, there were bars, and there are still bars outside Bombay. And she joined the bar, and she got picked up by these group of men, boys, was raped, tortured, murdered. We found the body after 3 days, and in the mangroves of Vashi. And the police called us, asked us to identify the body. And then we said, okay, reach out to the parents, because we didn't know who the parents were. We knew who the parents were. And the parents refused to come and take the body. They said, either we take the body, but you will not be there, and you will have to personally go and cut out the person's clothes, because anyways, you know, we don't want any visage of them which are associated with you to be there if you want us to claim the body. So no dignity in life, no dignity in death. And that is why violence becomes such an important topic to talk about, and not to normalize violence, and finding empathy and finding a different viewpoint towards violence. Because if I were to look at my community, and I say this without shame and without any remorse, we should have been the ones with the AK-47s out there getting most of y'all, because even if I look at what we are reduced to today, is just a caricature, with the judiciary, with elected representatives saying that, you know, wo to aadmi hai na aurat, wo hijdo se bhi badtar hai. I mean, these kind of languages are used, and we kind of normalize it because we laugh, or we are either stunned to respond to it. I think it's time that we kind of put back some of our responses to really recalibrate how we deal with violence, and what is it that we need to provide as alternatives to kind of, you know, breach this fortress around, you know, celebrating or romanticizing violence.
What do we need to do in terms of providing alternatives? And again, how do we bring about positive action through change? How do we nudge people to think differently? And you wanted to interject. I'll come back to you. Amish, personalities. You're a personality today. You know, you host television stuff. You've been writing a whole number of books. You're one of the most sought after speakers and writers. What is your responsibility to nudge people to positive action, which is, in her words, empathetic? One of the things that we keep forgetting is that for any positive action to happen, there has to be an aspect of empathy built into it, otherwise it cannot be positive change. What is the responsibility, and how do you see that in this milieu?
Anyone in the public space has that responsibility, and if you're an artist, it's impossible that you won't have an ideology, right? But if you are aiding what is a long-term bringing together of different societal members, then you're a part of the solution. You're doing something positive. So, for example, in my books, I have women as prime ministers. I have women. Goddess Sita. I don't know how many of you would have seen the cover of that. She's a warrior in my version. I have a book called Suhail De, where I have two gay warriors. In that book, the book's generated no controversy at all. In fact, has done very well. And in that book, I haven't caricatured them like how, regrettably, the Indian film industry tends to do it at times. They're two warriors. They just happen to be in love with each other. That's it, right? If any artist, and look, none of us can change the world. That's supreme arrogance, right? If any artist is aiding it in the smallest way that he or she can, then they are helping the situation. But one of the things you realize as you see more of the world, that usually life is very complicated, right? As you know, I've been through a difficult personal time, 7-8 years, lost many members of my family, some of them very tragically. You start seeing the world differently. You realize there are no simple black and white solutions in life. It's usually very complicated. And often people who come with a lot of moral clarity, which in the ancient Indian way often gets allocated to moral arrogance, they end up making the situation worse because you realize actually things are very complicated. Let me give this with an example of my late brother-in-law. He was a police officer. And the way people, there are some parts of society which ends up seeing, because of the nature of their work, they end up seeing the nether regions of our society. If you're a police officer, if you're an NGO, various. There was this one case, and my brother-in-law, he was an IPS officer. There are some IPS officers who believe in encounters. He was very clear. That will never happen wherever he has jurisdiction. He says things have to go through the process because you can't have vigilantism, right? Not even by cops. Now that was his approach. There was this one specific case, and I won't tell you the community of the cases. People like to just make that. It's actually about that individual. This was in Maharashtra. It was in northern Maharashtra. He was at that time an SP. There was this man who had raped a 6-month-old baby. Okay. He had done it in such a horrific way that the poor baby had been actually ripped up till here. Okay. Himanshuda was like, he was beyond, and I remember my sister telling me, like, I've never seen him so angry. Okay. And it took some day and a half. They went all over, they caught the guy. Okay. The guy, and that's what shocked Himanshuda so much, he wasn't even like feeling remorse or guilt, right? It was more like, मैं पकड़ा गया अभी क्या होगा मेरा, okay? And Himanshuda said it was so difficult for him to control his constables and inspectors because even they have seen terrible things, but man like this, like they said, just kill this guy. He doesn't deserve to live, right? But he stopped it, right? He said, no, that's not going to happen. He's going to go through the process. And he made the case such and the guy was punished. But that's a discussion I was having with him at that point of time. That what if I or other cops happened to be there and we'd actually caught him doing this? Would it have been right for us to just get rid of him then and there and save that baby, right? Because he may have done it again. He said, God knows, man. And he said, I don't know if I would have done that. Now, in this case, is violence justified, not justified? And these are the
eternal question from the Mahabharata.
And
when and how?
these are, you realize actually life and society is very complicated. It's very difficult to have simple black and white answers. Life is tough. It is tough. But as long as if you are doing something to help someone who is weaker, someone who is suffering, then maybe you're aiding the cause of Dharma and you're helping society.
Remember, you guys can put out your questions. I hope you've taken it. We'll take questions another 4 minutes. Rajshri, life is tough. There's nothing black and white. You've taken on the responsibility. You helped a whole host of people in the earthquake in Nepal and then in the drought areas in Maharashtra. What is the responsibility of somebody like you in your position of influence today to be able to make that change?
I think each and
Let me
every-
add to that. And should other people also join the same effort? Many NGOs here strive to get the message out, but they're not able to because they don't have a champion for their cause. And I'm talking about the cause, not necessarily for A or B or C NGO, but for the cause. Is that one way that they can approach people to say, will you champion our cause? Like,
See, I don't think so. Honestly, nobody will champion us. We only have to work to get things done. Do you think that I'm an actor that means everything's easy? I'm currently handling 4 POSCO cases from villages. 13-year-old girl, 12-year-old one, 10-year-old girl from villages. All come from a community, from Pardis to Lamani, Do you think I'm able to do that? No. Nothing. I'm not able to even every day I'm calling that police person that, काय झालं? And then my only what is left in with me is now, work with the girl, work with the family. So nobody, like we think that, maybe that that person may champion something and things will change. No, we have to work on ground. No matter who is the ambassador for any particular thing, they are not changing anything. They are doing their own shit. We only have to go with our communities, the people where we are working, and we have to sit with them. They won't know that, कौन हो तुम, कहाँ से आई हो. They want to understand कि मैं अभी क्या करना है. I want to do farming. I don't have water. What do we do now? My husband is alcoholic. He's beating me every day, every night. My daughter is goes for the sugar cutting labor job. She's got raped there. I don't know what to do. Nobody will come and we only have to sit. We have to get it done. So we have to be there. We have to have people. We have to create leaders on ground. The areas where you all working, create leaders from there. They are the heroes, not the ones who's being ambassador or goodwill or whatever. We think that, we are making a difference. No, actually. These people who are here, who actually goes on ground and work with the communities, who's actually changing things, they are the ones, for me, my farmers who's actually there, who's holding my hand, who's like, because I crumble all the time. There are times I am so angry. Like, now I'm like better and better because I feel, my farmers, those people on ground has told me that, we will make sure things will happen.
so
If
you're
it's
the
slow.
heroes. Everybody give yourselves a big round of applause.
Absolutely,
We need
you
to
guys
empower
are.
each
Yeah,
person
yeah.
there.
And I just wanted to say that to her. Thank you so much for your amazing work. And we are responsible. Filmmakers are responsible for what is actually happening. So I'm really sorry that the kind of scripts have been written, the way the community has been portrayed on screen is bad. And I don't know when things will change.
We'll come
I
to
really
Nandita.
hope that.
Zainab, Lakshmi Narayan Tripathi really, in many ways, broke the mold. She's today the Mahamandaleshwar of the Kinnar community, appointed by the Juna Khara, and she sort of moved away from being seen as a victim. In many ways, how do you see you as a role model to express for this particular community and claim your rights?
I think we should stop looking at role models. We are all role models in our own way. What are my set of conditions that I have gone through, I wouldn't wish anyone to go through. I was subject to shock therapy, religious, mumbo jumbo. I was taken to be prayed over. People thought I was possessed. I toyed with suicide. I think the age of looking up to role models is over. As they said, we need to look at us internally. And I also don't look at it from a victim or a role model perspective. I got into activism to basically save myself, to redeem my own self, to bring salvation to myself, and then then it kind of automatically built on. It rubbed on to some, it stayed with some, we were able to create a movement. And I think that's exactly what's happening around us. Today, when we kind of put people up on a pedestal, whether it's a politician from West Bengal who is seen to be as very vocal and very feminist, and it takes one moment to fall down from grace and everyone says, oh my God, look at what's happened. So I guess each one of us also has to realize that we are all humans, and just quoting on to what Amish, generally talks about scriptures, Varuna, the god of water, has about 100 eyes, and Indra has about 1,000, and you and I just have 2. So with our very limited perception, first of all understanding perception, and then assimilation and throwing out at people, we have very little time. So best is that instead of role modeling yourself, at one point of time I thought Benazir Bhutto was my role model for some reason. I came up with all kinds of crazy models, and I just realized at the end of the day, the best role model to look at is his multiple ideas of what you want to get from a particular individual, rather than to fixate and make someone into a role model and create stereotypes. Because I've been told as a trans person that they don't mind working with people like me, they don't mind having people like me around, because probably I dress like you, I talk the same language, I'm not as obnoxious looking, or I don't stand out in the crowd. And this idea of a trans person works for them, so she becomes the role model. And I don't want to get into reverse stereotyping. And I said, I'm sorry, this is what I choose to be, but I totally respect someone who's standing out in the sun on the signal and begging, because that's a choice, unfortunately, by the situations around them, that they cannot get into something like what I have been able to. So I can't be a role model for them, but I can try and work towards showing them alternate pathways for empowerment.
A big round for that. Thank you all for your questions. I'm going to just take them in clusters, and I apologize if I'm not able to cover all of the questions you guys have sent in here, because there are many of them. So I'm going to start with Nandita. Nandita, again, cluster questions, so stay with me here. With a rise in movies with violence and misogynist men termed as heroes, keeping freedom of expression intact, can they ever be held accountable for the damage they can cause? So this is about misogynist men, and what you talked about, freedom of expression. How can that damage be contained? So that's one. The second is, how difficult is it to make a movie that speaks about social issues, but puts the message out there when the capitalist world wants box office numbers? And you can talk about your most recent movie in this case. And the third, sorry, I'm going to load you with all three.
I'm not even going to remember.
I'll come back to it. You mentioned consider getting angry as violence. Anger is an emotion. Do we see an emotion as violence, or should we talk about expressing these emotions in an appropriate way? So complicated question.
Okay.
So you can start reverse. So this last one is about violence and expression of anger.
Okay, so the last one is about whether anger, and it sounds odd to say, almost counterintuitive, if you say that one shouldn't be angry, one shouldn't express. I grew up thinking anger was a good thing, because I was angry about injustice, I was angry about incompetence. I just felt like it's okay, and I've been taught that to speak your mind is a good thing, to be frank, to be blunt. And over the years, maybe that's my personal journey. I'm not saying that's the right journey or you should relate to it, but I feel there are various other emotions. This whole thing of justifying, because I want to be honest, because I think it's justified, I think it puts too much self-importance. I think it's more important to be empathetic. It's more important to know your place and be, have a humility, to feel constantly that the other person is maybe fighting a harder battle. Maybe there are other reasons why that person is behaving. It's not always easy. We all get angry, but I don't want to justify it to myself. That's my personal journey, and that's how I see. So to say that I have all these emotions, it's my right to express it, I don't think. It's not only about being civil. That we've all learned to be polite. We don't say the truth. I'm not saying that. I'm saying to remain authentic, but to find other ways to express and to understand each other.
And be empathetic.
and be, empathetic and to understand each other where the other person's coming from.
So the second one, Nandita, was
Trying to be
making
brief as well. Huh.
making a film with a social message.
Right.
What's the capitalist? What's the box office issue there?
It's tough, you know. I mean, the 40 films that I worked in 10 different languages, you'll barely know 4 or 5 because many of those films have just, you know, died. They were shown in some festival in their own state. These were all mostly pre-digital OTT time. So, but those stories are documented. I feel the true test to judge any form of art is only time. If something stands the test of time, that's good, and you know that you can term it as a good art. Because otherwise everything is subjective. I may like a film, you may not like it, some book, you know, somebody may like it or not. So I think despite that, you have to be true to what you believe in and the kind of work I do. So I'm already aware that my film is not going to be this box office hit. So there are no disappointments. It's a choice I've made to
And you have
do
to
a
make it in a
certain-
contained budget as well.
You make it in as frugal, in fact. All 3 films, if I've spoken to other producers, they were like, it's impossible the budget you've made it in. Like even Manto that Rajshri was part of, you know, it's a period film, etc. We made it very, very frugally, so the stakes are low enough. And it's a slow burner. There are less and less people. But I think in percentage, we may be less of us who watch these kind of films. But in absolute numbers, there are enough of us. But unfortunately, because often producers don't come with that conviction, they don't think creatively about marketing, what you said. You know, they want to cookie cutter and they want to market that film exactly like they would market a Bollywood film. And it doesn't work. But again, I'm always sort of, you know, believing
and the
about
last,
time.
Nandita, is
No,
the
just
Bollywood
just one line on this. So Zwegato, which was my last film, which you mentioned, you know, was released just after COVID, but it's still not on an OTT platform. It's about the gig economy, the struggles of these food delivery riders, and how they are caught in this world of algorithm and rating and incentive. So it's a very relevant film, and I'm struggling. But does that dissuade me from doing such films? Would I then end up doing something that I know will be released and will have? Then I'll have to really kill my soul for it, right? So
And the last one was, can we hold heroes who are misogynists and show violence in their movies, can we hold them accountable for the damage that they can?
Of course we have to hold accountable. Freedom of expression doesn't mean that there is no accountability. There's greater accountability. Whether the heinous crime that you talked about, which was like totally turned my stomach, and I'm sure all of us, and many such things. I mean, Zainab talked about these kind of issues that happen, these kind of incidents that happen on a daily basis. Just because there's no media glare, it doesn't mean it doesn't happen. I remember going to a Hijra Habba in Bangalore about 10, 15 years ago. There were almost about 10,000 people, and some of them said, this is the one day that I can authentically live in who I am. This is the kind of society we have created, which is full of judgment and prejudice and all of that. So it's not about lack of accountability. It is, but I mean, that's a whole different conversation. What you and I were having about whether capital punishment is a solution to something like that, you know. So,
Amish, again,
quick.
because we're going to run out of time, short answers if possible. How does one get better at storytelling to capture human stories from the field? What are some books you would recommend to capture and craft a compelling narrative? So that's one. So the second is, can a story really change anything in society? Mahabharata is the time-tested and greatest example that a story can never change society. So how do you bring about change? And the third is, do impact stories need to have a positive ending to get an audience? How can we show struggle and failure as well without alienating people?
Okay. I'll start with the last question first. No, actually, I'm not in agreement with the Bollywood thing that you need a happy ending. That actually comes more from the Persian storytelling style, which some say was more inspired by Aristotle's Poetics. If you see the traditional Indian storytelling style outside of the Sanskrit Nataks, many of our stories actually had very inconclusive and often tragic endings. Just look at the Ramayana and the Mahabharata, actually. Not the ending of the television serials, the actual texts, right? Both of them actually, they leave you in many ways not happy, right, at the end of it. And I think the perspective that our ancestors used to have is if you have a happy ending, the story is wrapped up, put in a cupboard and forgotten about. If you have a story ending which leaves you
You'll get a sequel.
unhappy.
These days it's 8,
No, it's not about the sequel. It's not about the sequel. You keep thinking about it. And then if you keep thinking about it, you learn the philosophies that are supposed to be learned. I think that's, if you look at it from that perspective, the ending of the Ramayana actually makes sense. If you see it from that perspective, the actual ending of the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas are climbing up to go to Devalok and they find Duryodhana out there.
Yeah.
And like, what's going on, man?
And the doggy.
If you see it from that perspective, then the ending makes sense. My Shiva trilogy doesn't have a happy ending. In fact, I had many writing to me again and again. It's a very tragic ending. It's supposed to leave you unhappy. Yeah, that is actually the traditional Indian storytelling style, because the purpose is not to give you a nice story which you can wrap up in a ribbon and then forget about. No.
So keep them
Purpose
guessing.
is
This is
something
not
which
about
will-
riding out into
Which will
sunset.
keep gnawing at you, aisa kyun hua? And then when you start asking those questions, you learn the philosophies that the author wants you to think about. That's the ending. What is the second question? Yeah, these aren't questions you can give short answers to. Yeah.
I know, but
Any books I'd recommend? Look,
Yeah.
if self-help books worked, they would stop selling. Okay, I'd actually tried self-help books, utter flop. You write the story the way it comes to you. चले ना चले वो भगवान के ऊपर है, readers के ऊपर है. Don't think about all that. Write the way it comes to you. And if you want to be a good storyteller, read a lot. Okay, and I read at least 5-6 books per month. Reading at that pace for decades and observe people. If you want to be a storyteller, you have to be like a sponge. Everyone and try and meet different people. Everyone you meet has something to teach you. Some take something. All of that goes in as material in the back of the mind.
you know, one of the things I keep telling my colleagues at Salam Balak Trust when they do their annual reports and I have to read through them and edit it, I said, please don't. Tell a story instead. Tell a story of each of the people who you've helped. Tell a story of the transformation of the staff and how it's impacted them, how it's impacted their lives. Stop writing boring reports. That has to be lesson number 1 in terms of how to move forward. Zainab, coming to you, what's the role of individuals when so many issues are structural? Do narratives need to start making large-scale actors like governments, people in power more accountable?
I think the answer is short and yes. Narratives constantly change the way we see, perceive things. Like, for example, when I started reading Amish's books, my entire perspective about the Shiva trilogy or to look at the epics changed. And I think there were so many other series of books that I kept reading after that, because the quest for knowledge is only going to change if your seeing and visualization pattern is going to change, and that is only going to happen when you have an alternative narrative or a set of narratives going on, because each one of us will perceive or relate to a particular narrative only to that angle. Like, for example, just think of food. It might be aroma, it might be the taste of cumin, or it might be the hatred for coriander. Some of you would relate to that food better than the others just because of the situations in which it is. It's the same kind of food, but I think our own perceptions, our own lived realities and our biases, because we have a brain, we have a bias, makes us think. But providing you with alternate narratives is something that we're doing, and this is exactly what we are doing today, right? All of us want options. Are we happy with the same kind of food? If you go to a Swiggy and Zomato and all of these food, you want to see options, you want to see different variety. Same with social media content. So I think the more variety that you have with narratives, the more you are able to change the subconscious mind.
Rajshri, the last question to you. How do we best leverage media in today's day and age of short attention spans to get attention for social impact stories?
I know.
Short,
See,
time's up.
Social media is like a weapon. Use it very, very, very carefully. You can kill someone or you can save someone. Create your own narratives. See actually what's happening in the society. Be there. You know, don't trust something immediately. You know, and yeah, I think as empathy is the most important part in life. just carry that inside you.
So be authentic, tell the story that you have to tell. Don't try and copy and don't necessarily use ChatGPT. All the stories will be the same. I keep saying use food, especially in the NGO sector. The most obnoxious government or local headman or whatever, feed them a really nice meal. It makes a huge difference, and food is a great leveler. Tell your stories interestingly, and most importantly, don't compromise on what you're going to put out there. Tell your story with empathy and do your thing, because each of you are role models. To our wonderful panel, Amish, Nandita, Rajshri, Zainab, thank you all for coming to Charcha. Thank you for giving us hints of how to nudge, and really appreciate each of you taking out time to join all of us. Very, very important. Thank you all.
Please give them another hand. Thank you, Sanjoy. That was outstanding. And thank you, panel, for bringing your heart into this conversation. Before we break for lunch, we will begin the next session here at 2 o'clock. So that's another 45 minutes away. I do want to let you know that this evening at 7 p.m., we have an outstanding music performance by Kutle Khan and band. For those of you who are familiar, he is a Rajasthani folk and Sufi maestro. Thank you for your attention. We'll see you here at 2.